I walked into Betty's cafe at 1:47 p.m., 15 minutes early, because I wanted to see them before they saw me. I wanted to watch them squirmed. The bell above the door chimed, and the familiar smell of stale coffee and bacon grease wrapped around me like an old coat. Betty was behind the counter, wiping down the grill with the same rag she'd been using since I started working there. She gave me a single nod, her eyes flicking toward the corner booth where my father was already sitting, nursing a cup of black coffee. He was alone. I slid into the booth across from him, and he flinched like I'd struck him. He looked older. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and there was a tremor in his hands that hadn't been there before. The heart condition was showing. He wore a polo shirt that was too big for him, hanging off his shoulders like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. "Jenna," he said, and his voice cracked on the second syllable. "You look good. Really good." I didn't respond to the compliment. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I had learned that trick from my grandmother: whoever speaks first loses. My father shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, and pulled a manila folder out of a leather briefcase that had seen better days. "I brought everything you asked for," he said, sliding it across the table. "The property documents, the mortgage statements, the wedding contracts. It's all in there. I even brought the medical bills. I'm not trying to hide anything." I opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. I didn't understand everything at first glance, but I recognized the names of law firms, the fine print on loan agreements, the astronomical interest rates on credit cards. My parents had been bleeding money for years, propping up my brother's lifestyle, while their own financial foundation crumbled. The lakefront cabin, the great inheritance, the timberland that was supposed to save them, it was all tied up in a legal knot that would take years to unravel. "This is a mess," I said, closing the folder. "You're $45,000 in credit card debt. The mortgage is underwater. And you've got legal fees piling up faster than you can pay them. How did you even get this deep?" "Your brother," my father said, and he said it like it was a confession. "We co-signed on his business school loans. Then we co-signed on the house. Then we borrowed against the cabin to pay for the wedding. We thought the timberland would sell quickly. But then the heirs from your grandmother's first marriage showed up with a lawyer, and everything got frozen. We've been living on credit for 2 years, just trying to keep it together." "And where is Derek?" My father looked down at his coffee. "He's coming. He wanted to come with me, but I thought it was better if I talked to you first. He's not in a good place, Jenna. He's been drinking. Brittany's threatening to leave him if they can't get the wedding back on track. Her parents are furious." I almost felt a flicker of sympathy, but I stamped it out. I thought of the trash bags. I thought of the $47. I thought of the park bench. "He's not the victim here, Dad. He gave you an ultimatum, and you chose him. You chose him over me. That's the only reason I'm sitting across from you right now. Because I have the ability to help, and you know it." My father nodded slowly. He looked like a man being led to the gallows. "What do you want from us? We'll do anything. We'll give you anything." "I don't want anything," I said, and I meant it. "I don't want money. I don't want the cabin. I don't want your approval or your love. I want something much simpler. I want the truth." He blinked. "The truth about what? About why you let him do it. Why you let him kick me out without a fight. Why you didn't even try to protect me. I want to hear you say it, Dad. Not some excuse about the baby or the wedding or the stress. I want to hear you say what you really believed about me when you watched me walk out that door." The cafe was quiet. Betty had turned off the fryer and was pretending to reorganize the napkin dispensers. My father's hands were trembling so badly that he had to put his coffee cup down. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then opened it again. "I thought you'd be fine," he finally said. "I thought you were strong enough to figure it out. You've always been the strong one, Jenna. You never needed us. Derek, he was always so fragile. He needed everything. He needed the money, the support, the validation. And I was so tired. I was so tired of fighting him, of trying to manage his expectations. When he gave that ultimatum, I gave in. Because it was easier." I stared at him. "Easier?" "Yes." He looked me in the eye for the first time. "Easier." And that's the most shameful thing I've ever admitted out loud. I took the easy way out because I was afraid of what Derek would do if I said no. I was afraid of losing my son. And I didn't think I'd lose my daughter. I was wrong. I was so wrong. The irony hit me like a punch to the gut. Derek had threatened to leave, and they clung to him. I had actually been left, and they assumed I'd come back. They had made a calculation, and I had lost. But calculations can be revisited. I didn't forgive him. I wasn't ready for that. But I understood him, and that was something. When Derek gets here, I want him to sit in this booth and tell me the same thing, I said. And then I want him to sign a contract. I'm going to give you a loan, not a gift. I'm going to pay off the credit card debt and put a hold on the mortgage payments for 6 months. In exchange, you're going to give me power of attorney over the cabin and the timberland until the legal dispute is resolved. I'll work with the lawyers to get the heirs to settle. I'll manage the property. And when it's sold, I get my money back first with interest. My father's jaw dropped. You want to manage the property? I've been doing my research, I said. I've been reading about property law and estate disputes. I've met with a lawyer who's willing to work on contingency. I know what I'm doing. You trusted Derek to handle everything, and look where that got you. Now it's my turn. The bell above the door chimed again, and Derek walked in. He looked like hell. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was greasy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He saw me, and for a second, he looked like he was going to turn around and walk out. Then he forced himself to approach the booth, sliding in next to our father like a guilty child. I'm here, he said, not meeting my eyes. Look at me. I said. He looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, and I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath. I don't want your apology, I said. I want your compliance. I'm going to take over the wedding planning. I'm going to renegotiate the contracts. I'm going to find a cheaper venue, cheaper caterers, and cheaper flowers. Brittany's parents are threatening to pull the funding because they think you're irresponsible. I'm going to fix that. But you're going to listen to me. You're going to do exactly what I say when I say it. You're going to stop drinking, stop crying, and stop acting like a victim. Because you're not a victim. You're a grown man who created this mess, and I'm only helping you because I don't want to see Mom and Dad lose their house. Derek opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. If you say anything other than I agree, I walk. I get up from this booth, I go back to work, and I never speak to any of you again. The only reason I'm here is because I'm not you. You would have let them burn. I won't. But that doesn't mean I have to be nice about it. The silence in the booth was suffocating. My father looked at Derek, and for the first time, I saw something other than deference in his eyes. I saw anger. Real, bone-deep anger. Derek, say it, my father said, his voice sharp. Agree with your sister, or I swear to God You'll what? Dad, you'll kick me out, Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. You already chose me. You chose me over her. You can't unchoose me now. I can, my father said. And he stood up. He pulled out his wallet, threw 2 $20 bills on the table, and looked down at his son with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It was disgust. I should have stood up for your sister a long time ago. I should have told you to shut your mouth and show some respect. You think Brittany's parents are going to respect a man who uses his family like a bank. You think your baby is going to respect a father who can't take care of himself. Derek went pale. Dad, Jenna is the only one in this family who has any sense. And if she's willing to fix this mess, I'll follow her orders. You will too. Or so help me. I will find a way to disown you. I don't care about the inheritance. I don't care about the wedding. I care about not spending the rest of my life paying for your mistakes. He turned to me. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. I don't care if you want the cabin, the timberland, my next paycheck. I'll sign it. I'm done being weak. Derek was stunned. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, without warning, he buried his face in his hands. I thought he was crying, but when he looked up, his expression was cold. Fine, he said. Take over. Do whatever you want. But if this goes wrong, if I lose Brittany because you cut corners on the flowers or the venue, I will never forgive you. I will make your life a living hell. I leaned across the table, close enough to see the whites of his eyes. Derek, listen to me very carefully. I don't care about your forgiveness. I don't care about your threats. I don't care about your feelings. I am going to fix this, and when I do, you're going to sit in that church, marry Brittany, and smile like you've never been happier. But you're never going to forget that the only reason you're standing there is because I saved you. And every time you look at your son, every time he reaches for you, you're going to remember that I was the one who held this family together when you couldn't. I slid the manila folder across the table. Now sign the authorization. I have a lawyer waiting for the notarized copies. You have 2 hours to read the fine print. Then I'm going to start making calls. Derek's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. My father sat back down, his eyes fixed on his son, and I knew in that moment that the dynamic had shifted forever. The golden child was tarnished. The discarded daughter was holding the keys. The pen scratched against the paper, and when Derek slid it back to me, I saw that his signature was barely legible. He looked like a man who had just signed his own death warrant. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, sliding out of the booth. Same time, same place. We're going to start with the venue contracts. And Derek, he looked up, don't be late. I walked out of Betty's cafe and didn't look back. The air outside was cool, carrying the first hint of autumn. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. It was time to get to work. The first chapter ends with me walking away from a family that finally, reluctantly, was learning to listen to me. The dynamic has shifted. The daughter they abandoned has become the woman they need. Now the real work begins. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment with the manila folder spread out around me like a map of a war zone. The landlord, Mr. Costas, had left a note under my door about the rent being due in 3 days, and I'd shoved it into a drawer without reading it. I had bigger things to worry about. The wedding contracts were the first thing I dissected. Derek and Brittany had booked a venue called the Sterling Estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town that charged $8,000 just for the rental. The catering was another $12,000, the flowers $6,000, the photographer $4,000, and the band, a local cover band that played classic rock, was $3,000. All of it was non-refundable. They had put down deposits totaling over $15,000, and the balance was due in 60 days. I called my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn who had agreed to work on contingency because she saw the potential in the Timberland case. I told her about the venue, the deposits, and the non-refundable clauses. Non-refundable doesn't mean non-negotiable, Evelyn said over the phone, her voice crackling with static. Get me a copy of the venue contract. I'll find a loophole. These high-end places are terrified of bad reviews. You'd be surprised what they'll do to avoid a public relations nightmare. I spent the next morning on the phone calling the venue, the caterer, the florist. I didn't introduce myself as Derek's sister. I didn't mention the wedding at all. I pretended to be a prospective bride looking to book the same date, just to see what kind of leverage they were willing to offer. By the time I hung up, I had a list of every discount, every upgrade, and every cancellation policy they had ever offered to other clients. The florist, a woman named Patricia, was the easiest. She had a cancellation clause hidden in the fine print that allowed for a full refund if the wedding was postponed by more than 90 days. The Sterling Estate had a similar clause buried in the addendum. If the event was rescheduled outside of peak season, the venue fee dropped by 40%. The only real obstacle was the caterer, who was a notoriously stubborn local business owner named Rick. He didn't do discounts. He didn't do refunds. He did whatever he wanted. I marked Rick's name in red ink. I'd deal with him later. On Friday, I met my father and Derek at Betty's again. This time, Derek showed up alone. My father had called in sick. He said he was feeling dizzy, but I suspected he just couldn't stomach another confrontation. Derek sat down across from me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes fixed on the table. I've been thinking, I said, pulling out my notes. We're going to cut the budget by at least 40%. The venue is too expensive. I'm going to call them and negotiate a reschedule to October. October, Derek looked up, panicked. The wedding is in October. That's the date. We're going to push it back a year. October of next year. The venue fee drops by 40%, and I've already found a clause that lets us get a full refund on the deposit. The florist is on board. The photographer is on board. The caterer is the only one who's going to be a problem, and I've got a plan for him too. Derek stared at me like I'd just suggested sacrificing a goat. You want to postpone the wedding? Brittany will kill me. Her parents will kill me. They've already invited 300 people. They've sent out the save the dates. My mother-in-law ordered her dress. Do you have any idea what this will do to my reputation? Your reputation? I leaned back in my seat. Derek, you have no reputation. You have a pile of debt, a pregnant fiancé, and a family that's about to lose its house. The only thing you have going for you is me. And right now, I'm the one who's giving you a way out. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went white. It's Brittany. She's crying. She found out I'm meeting with you. She says if I postpone the wedding, she's leaving. Then let her leave, I said. If she's willing to walk away over a wedding date, she's not in it for the long haul. You've got a baby on the way, Derek. You've got a mortgage, a pile of debt, and a family that's about to implode. If she's not willing to stand by you now when things are hard, she's not going to stand by you when things get harder. He didn't respond. He just stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. I watched him, and for the first time, I saw something other than arrogance in his eyes. I saw fear. Real, genuine fear. I don't know how to tell her, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She's been planning this wedding since she was 12. She's got a Pinterest board with 15,000 pins. She's already tried on 50 dresses. Her mother has been talking about it for months. They're going to hate me. They might, I agreed. But they're going to hate you more if you drag them into bankruptcy. Brittany's parents aren't rich. They're comfortable, sure, but they can't afford to keep funding this wedding indefinitely. If you keep pushing forward, they're going to start asking questions about the money. And when they find out the property is tied up in legal disputes, and you've got no savings and your parents are drowning in credit card debt, they're going to pull the plug anyway. This way, you control the narrative. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What about the caterer?" Rick the caterer, I smiled. "I've got a plan. He's known for being a pain in the ass. But he's also got a reputation to protect. He's been in this town for 30 years, and he's never had a bad review. I'm going to offer him a deal. He gives us a 50% discount on the same menu, and I'll make sure he gets a glowing feature in the local paper. I've got a contact at the Gazette who owes me a favor. If he says no, I'm going to start making calls about his health code violations." Derek's mouth dropped open. "You'd blackmail him." "Not blackmail," I corrected. "Leverage. There's a difference. Blackmail is illegal. Leverage is just knowing where the bodies are buried. And right now, I know where a lot of bodies are buried." I could see the struggle on his face. He was used to being the one in control, the one who called the shots. But now he was sitting across from his little sister, the sister he discarded, and she was the one holding all the cards. "Okay," he finally said. "Do it. But you're going to have to be the one to tell Brittany." "I can't do it. I can't face her." That was the moment I knew I was in charge. My brother, the golden child, was folding. He was handing me the reins because he couldn't handle the pressure. And I wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. I drove to Brittany's parents' house that evening. It was a large, well-maintained colonial in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of house that screamed middle-class stability. Brittany answered the door in a silk robe, her hair in curlers, a glass of white wine in her hand. She looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and barely concealed disdain.
"What are you doing here?" she asked.
"Derek told me you were trying to take over our wedding. I don't want to hear anything you have to say." "I'm not trying to take over your wedding," I said, stepping inside without being invited. "I'm trying to save it. Do you have any idea what kind of financial situation Derek is in? Do you know about the property dispute, the legal fees, the credit card debt?" She blinked, her defensiveness cracking just slightly. "He told me it was under control. He said his parents were handling everything." "His parents are $45,000 in debt," I said flatly. "They've been borrowing against the cabin to pay for your wedding. The cabin is tied up in a legal battle that could take years to resolve. They're going to lose everything if we don't act now." Brittany's face went pale. She set the wine glass down on a side table and sank into a nearby armchair. "He didn't tell me any of this. He said his father had a medical issue, but he didn't say anything about the money. He didn't want to scare you. But the truth is, if we don't postpone the wedding and renegotiate the contracts, you're going to be starting your marriage with a mountain of debt and a family that's on the verge of ruin. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for your child? She was quiet for a long time. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the calculations she was making. She wasn't stupid. She was ambitious, maybe even a little ruthless. But she wasn't stupid. If I agree to this, what's in it for me? She finally asked, and I almost smiled. You get to keep your wedding. You get to keep your dress, your flowers, your Pinterest board. You just get it a year later, and at a much lower cost. And you get the satisfaction of knowing that when you walk down that aisle, you're not walking into a financial disaster. Derek will be stable. Your parents will be stable. And you'll have the wedding you always dreamed of, without the debt. She stared at me, and I could see the moment she made her decision.
Fine.
But I'm not going to be the one to tell my parents. You're going to have to do that. And you're going to have to convince them that this is the right thing to do. I nodded. I'd already expected that. I'll handle your parents. You just focus on keeping Derek from spiraling. And one more thing. I need you to sign a document agreeing to the postponement. It's not a contract, exactly. It's more of a letter of intent. She looked at me warily. What's in it? It says that you and Derek agree to postpone the wedding for 1 year, and that in exchange, I will manage the wedding planning and the financial negotiations. It's not legally binding. It's just a way to make sure everyone is on the same page. She signed it without reading the fine print. I knew she wouldn't read it. She was too emotionally drained to care that I left Brittany's house with a signed letter and the beginnings of a plan. The flowers were taken care of. The venue was being renegotiated. The photographer was on board. The only loose end was the caterer, and I had a meeting with Rick scheduled for the next morning. I stopped by Mia's apartment on my way home. She was sitting on the couch, eating leftover pizza and binge-watching a reality show. She looked up when I walked in. Well, she asked. Did you get the Queen to sign the peace treaty, something like that? I said, flopping onto the couch beside her. Brittany's on board. Derek's a wreck, but he'll do what I say. My father is finally standing up for himself. The wedding is postponed. I've got most of the contracts renegotiated. The only thing left is the caterer. So, what's the plan? I'm going to see him tomorrow morning. Rick's been in this town for 30 years. He's got a reputation for being stubborn. But everyone's got a weakness. I just have to find his. Mia raised an eyebrow. And if you don't, then I'll make one. I said, and I meant it. I was done being the victim. I was done being the one who got pushed around. I'd spent 18 years being invisible. Now I was going to be the one people saw. The next morning, I walked into Rick's Deli and Catering, a hole-in-the-wall shop on the wrong side of Main Street. Rick was behind the counter, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a permanent scowl and a thick New York accent. Jenna, right, he said, not looking up from his paperwork. Derek's sister. I heard you've been making calls. Just one call, I said, pulling out my notes. I'm here to make you a deal. I don't do deals. My prices are firm. Your brother signed a contract, and I'm holding him to it. Even if that contract is going to bankrupt him, I asked. I've been looking at your contract, Rick. There's a clause that allows for a refund if the wedding is postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. I have a doctor's note from my father's cardiologist saying that he's been advised to avoid large gatherings due to his health. That counts as unforeseen circumstances. Rick's eyes narrowed. That's a stretch. Is it? I've also been looking at your health code records. You had a violation in 2021 for improper food storage. Another one in 2022 for pest control. You've been cited twice in the last 5 years. I know how to spin things, Rick. I can make you look like the hero who saved a family from financial ruin, or I can make you look like the villain who almost killed a heart patient with his catering. It's your choice. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. You're good. I'll give you that. Your brother never had your spine. He just threw money at problems until they went away. You actually know how to fight. Does that mean you'll work with me? He shrugged. I'll cut the price by 40%. But I want a feature in the Gazette. A full-page spread with pictures. And I want you to promise that if anyone asks, you'll tell them I was the one who saved your wedding. I extended my hand.
Done.
He shook it, and I felt a surge of victory unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I had just stared down a stone-cold businessman, and won. I had taken the mess my family had made and started turning it into something salvageable. I walked out of Rick's Deli and called Evelyn, my lawyer. "It's done," I said. "The caterer is on board. The venue is renegotiated. The flowers are handled. All that's left is the property dispute." "How's that going?" Evelyn's voice was cautious. "It's complicated. The heirs from your grandmother's first marriage are willing to settle, but they want a percentage. 50% of the sale price. I've been negotiating with their lawyer, and I think I can get them down to 35. But it's going to take some paperwork. And we're going to need your grandmother's original will." "I'll find it," I said. "My father keeps a copy in the safe at the house." "You're going to have to go back there eventually," Evelyn said. "Are you ready for that?" I paused. Going back to the house where I'd been kicked out, where I'd packed my trash bags and walked out the door, that was going to be harder than any negotiation with a caterer. But I knew I had to do it. The will was the key to everything. Without it, the property dispute would drag on for years. With it, I could finally break the tie. "I'm ready," I said. "I'll go tomorrow." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the window of Rick's Deli. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She had confidence. She had purpose. And she was about to walk back into the house that had rejected her and demand what was hers. The second chapter ends with me preparing to face the past. I have renegotiated the wedding contracts, won over the caterer, and now I'm ready to retrieve the will that could unlock the Timberland's future. The next step is the most difficult one. Walking back into the house where I was abandoned and confronting the ghosts that still linger there. The house looked smaller than I remembered. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, my hands shoved into the pockets of my jacket, staring at the two-story colonial where I'd spent the first 18 years of my life. The porch swing was still there, the one my father had hung the summer I turned 12. The rose bushes my mother had planted were overgrown, their branches crawling across the front walkway like they were trying to reclaim the property. The gutters were clogged with leaves, and the paint on the shutters was peeling. It looked tired. It looked like a house that had given up. I crossed the street, my footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. The front door was unlocked, which surprised me. I pushed it open and stepped inside, and the smell hit me immediately. That familiar mix of old carpet, cooking oil, and the faint mustiness of a house that hadn't been properly aired out in months. "Mom," I called out. "Dad," no response. The living room was a disaster. Dishes piled up in the sink, newspapers scattered across the coffee table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the counter. I'd never seen the house like this. My mother had always been meticulous, obsessive about keeping things clean. The mess was a sign of something deeper, something broken. I found my father in the study, sitting in his worn leather armchair with a stack of papers in his lap. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, he didn't recognize me. Then his face crumpled, and he set the papers aside. "Jenna, I didn't hear you come in." I called out, but no one answered. "Where's Mom?" "She's at the doctor's. She's been having panic attacks. The doctor prescribed her something, but she's not sleeping well. She's worried about the house, about the debt, about—" He stopped, his voice catching. "About everything." I sat down on the ottoman across from him, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. He looked even older than he had at Betty's. His hands were shaking, and there was a tremor in his voice that hadn't been there before. "I need the will," I said. "Grandma's original will. The one she kept in the safe." My father nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this. "It's in the safe. Your mother has the combination. She's been keeping it with her since the lawyers started calling. Then I'll wait for her to get back." He shook his head. "She won't give it to you. She's been holding on to it like it's a lifeline. She thinks if she keeps the will, she still has some control over what happens to the property." "She doesn't have control," I said. "She has a piece of paper that's going to get us all sued if we don't act. The heirs are demanding 50% of the sale price. If I can get my hands on the will, Evelyn can prove that Grandma's second marriage was legally recognized, which means the heirs from the first marriage don't have a claim. They can't get 50% if the will explicitly names my father as the sole beneficiary. My father stared at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. You think you can win, I know I can. But I need your help. I need you to talk to Mom. I need you to convince her that the only way out of this is to let me take the lead. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Your mother and we've been fighting about you. She's been beating herself up over what happened. She thinks you hate her. She thinks you'll never forgive her for what she did. I don't hate her, I said, and I meant it. I'm angry. I'm disappointed. But I don't hate her. She made a choice, and it was the wrong one. But she's still my mother. I just need her to trust me. My father reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, but it was warm. I'll talk to her. I'll make her understand. But you have to promise me something. What? Promise me that when this is all over, you'll still be part of this family. I know we don't deserve it. I know we failed you. But I don't want to lose you again. I couldn't survive it. I squeezed his hand, and for a moment, I felt the weight of everything I'd been carrying start to lift. I'm not going anywhere, Dad. I'm right here. The doorbell rang, and my father's face went pale. That's your mother. She must have forgotten her keys. He stood up, unsteady on his feet. I'll get the door. You stay here. I watched him walk out of the study, and I felt a surge of something, not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to it. He was trying. For the first time in my life, he was actually trying. I heard the front door open, and then I heard my mother's voice, sharp and brittle. What are you doing here? I stepped out of the study and saw my mother standing in the doorway, her purse clutched to her chest like a shield. She looked thin, almost gaunt, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Behind her, I saw a shadow, and then my heart stopped. Derek stepped out from behind her. He wasn't alone. Brittany was with him, her face red and blotchy, her eyes swollen from crying. And behind them, in the driveway, was a car I didn't recognize, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. What's going on? I asked, my voice steady despite the sudden knot in my stomach. Derek stepped forward, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was anger. Real, burning anger. You, he said, pointing at me. You ruined everything. Brittany's parents found out about the postponement. They called the venue, and the venue told them you'd been making calls. Now they're threatening to pull the funding for the entire wedding. Brittany's mother is talking about canceling the whole thing. She's saying I'm a fraud, a liar, a failure. And it's all because of you. I looked at Brittany, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the floor, her hands trembling. I'm trying to save your wedding, I said, my voice calm. I'm trying to save your family. If Brittany's parents want to pull the funding, that's on them. It's not on me. It is on you. Derek shouted, and the sound echoed through the house. You should have stayed out of it. You should have just given us the money and walked away. But no, you had to be the hero, the big sister who fixed everything. Well, look what you've done. Look what you've done to us. I felt the anger rising in my chest, but I forced it down. You came to me, Derek. You asked for my help. I didn't come to you. I didn't ask for this. You called me because you were drowning, and I threw you a lifeline. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself. You're the one who spent all the money. You're the one who let your parents go into debt for your wedding. You're the one who gave Brittany's parents the idea that you were a capable man. Derek lunged at me, and I saw the punch coming before it landed. I stepped aside, and he stumbled into the hallway, his fist connecting with the wall instead of my face. The drywall cracked, and he let out a howl of frustration. My father stepped between us, his voice sharp. Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping. My mother was crying now, her hands covering her face. Please, just stop, she pleaded. We're a family. We can't keep doing this to each other. Derek turned on her, his eyes wild. A family? You let her come in here and take over. You didn't even ask me. You just signed everything over to her like she was some kind of savior. She's not a savior. She's a— Stop, I said, my voice cutting through his rant. Just stop. You're not helping anyone. You're making everything worse." He glared at me, his chest heaving. Then, without warning, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Brittany didn't follow him. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, and looked at me with something that looked almost like admiration. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know he was going to do that. I didn't know he was so angry. "He's scared," I said. "He's terrified of losing everything. And when people are scared, they lash out at the people who are trying to help them." Brittany nodded slowly. "Is there any way to fix this, any way to salvage the wedding?" I looked at her, and I saw the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't a villain. She was just a woman who had gotten caught up in something bigger than herself. "There's always a way," I said. "But you're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to let me do what I need to do. And you're going to have to stand up to your parents. If they want to cancel the wedding, let them. But don't let them dictate your future." She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I'll talk to them. I'll make them understand." "Good," I said. "Now, I need to find my mother's keys. The combination to the safe is in her purse." My mother looked up, startled. "What? I need the will, Mom. I can't fix this without it. The heirs are going to sue us if we don't act. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cabin, the timberland, it's all going to be tied up in court for years. I can stop that, but I need the will." She hesitated, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't trust me. She didn't trust anyone. "Please," I said, and I meant it. "I know I'm asking a lot. I know I'm asking you to give up control. But I'm not going to let you down. I'm not going to let this family fall apart. I promise." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys. She handed them to me, her hand trembling. "The combination is your grandmother's birthday," she said. "The day, the month, and the year. She always used the same one." I took the keys and walked to the study. The safe was hidden behind a painting of a ship at sea, the one my grandmother had painted when she was in her 20s. I moved the painting aside, revealed the safe, and punched in the combination. It clicked open, and I pulled out the will. It was old, yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. I skimmed through it, and my heart leaped. My grandmother had explicitly named my father as the sole beneficiary of the timberland. She had written a clause that specifically excluded any heirs from her first marriage. The document was airtight that I walked back into the living room, and I held up the will. "It's done," I said. "I have it. Evelyn is going to use this to shut down the heirs. We're going to get control of the property back." My mother burst into tears. My father pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, the three of us just stood there in the middle of the messy living room, surrounded by the wreckage of our family, but the relief was short-lived. My phone buzzed, and I pulled it out to see a text from Evelyn. Urgent. "The heirs just filed a motion to freeze the property. They're claiming the will is invalid because it was not notarized correctly. We have 24 hours to prove otherwise." I looked up, my heart pounding. "We have a problem." The third chapter ends with a new conflict. The will is not enough, it was improperly notarized. The heirs have filed a motion to freeze the property, and I have only 24 hours to find proof that the will is valid. The clock is ticking, and the family is falling apart around me. My mother stopped crying instantly. Her face went white, and she grabbed the back of the sofa to steady herself. "What do you mean, improperly notarized? I was there when your grandmother signed it." The notary came to the house. I made her coffee while she stamped the papers. I read Evelyn's text again, my eyes scanning the words until they blurred. She says the notary's commission expired 3 months before the date on the will. The heir's lawyer found it. They're arguing the document was never legally witnessed. If we can't prove otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. My father sank into the nearest chair like someone had knocked the air out of him. "That's it then. We're done. We're going to lose everything." "No," I said, and my voice was harder than I intended. "We're not losing anything. There has to be a backup. A copy, a recording, something." My mother shook her head, her eyes glassy. "Your grandmother was careful. She had 2 copies of everything. One went to the attorney who handled her estate. The other was kept in the safe. I don't know where the attorney's copy went. He retired years ago. He might not even be alive. I pulled out my phone and called Evelyn. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me everything," I said. "Who is the notary? Do we have a name?" "Her name was Margaret Holloway," Evelyn said, and I could hear her typing in the background. "She was a registered notary in this county for 22 years. But her commission lapsed in 2004, and the will was dated January 2005. The heirs are arguing that the document was never properly witnessed, which means it's essentially worthless. Unless we can find some other evidence, a diary, a letter, a video, that confirms your grandmother's intentions before the notary issue came up." I thought about my grandmother. She'd been a meticulous woman, retired schoolteacher who kept records of everything. She had a filing cabinet in her house that was filled with receipts, letters, and old photographs. But the cabin had been cleaned out after she died. My father had hired a company to clear the property, and everything had been donated or thrown away. "There's nothing left," I said. "The cabin was cleared years ago." "Then we need to find the attorney who handled the estate," Evelyn said. "His name was Robert Finch. He had an office in the old bank building downtown. I've been trying to track him down, but I can't find a current address. He might have passed away. He might have moved out of state. But if he's alive, he might have a copy of the will in his files." I looked at my parents. My father was staring at the floor, his face blank with despair. My mother was twisting her hands in her lap, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an escape. "Does anyone know what happened to Robert Finch?" I asked. My father looked up.
"He died," he said.
"About 10 years ago. I remember your grandmother going to his funeral. She said he was the only lawyer she ever trusted." My heart sank. Did he have a partner, an associate, someone who took over his practice? My mother shook her head. "He worked alone. He was old school. He didn't even have a computer. Everything was on paper." I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I could feel the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me, and for a moment, I wanted to give up. I wanted to walk out the door and let them figure it out on their own, but then I thought about my grandmother. I thought about how she used to sit with me on the porch of the cabin, drinking iced tea and pointing out the different birds that visited the feeder. I thought about how she always told me that the most important things in life were never the easiest. "Wait," I said, opening my eyes. "You said he didn't have a computer. What about a physical file? Did he have a storage unit, a safe deposit box?" My mother frowned. "I don't know. He died suddenly, a heart attack. I remember hearing that his daughter came into town to handle his affairs. She might have taken his files. Do you know her name or how to find her?" My mother shook her head. "I never met her, but I might be able to find out. I used to be friends with the woman who worked at the bank. She might know something." I nodded. "Call her. Find out everything you can about Robert Finch's daughter. Her name, her phone number, her current address. I'm going to get in touch with Evelyn and see if there's any other way to prove the will's validity." My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "Do you really think you can fix this?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm not going to stop trying. That's the difference between me and the rest of this family." I walked out of the house and called Evelyn back. "The attorney is dead, but his daughter handled his affairs. I'm trying to track her down. In the meantime, is there any other way to prove the will is valid?" Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "There's a legal doctrine called lost will or lost instrument. If we can prove that your grandmother intended to give the property to your father through letters, written statements, or even testimony from people who heard her say it, we might be able to make a case. It's not as strong as a notarized will, but it's better than nothing." "Then we'll find the proof," I said. "I'll interview everyone who knew her. I'll dig through every scrap of paper in the cabin. I'll do whatever it takes." Evelyn sighed. "You've got a lot of energy, Jenna. But energy alone isn't going to convince a judge. We need hard evidence. And we only have 23 hours. I hung up and stood on the sidewalk, trying to figure out my next move. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Miad. "Your family is insane. But I love you. What do you need?" I smiled for the first time all day. I need you to come with me to the cabin. We're going to tear it apart until we find something useful. Mia showed up in her Civic 20 minutes later. She had a bottle of water, a bag of chips, and a determined look on her face. Let's do this, she said. The cabin was about 45 minutes outside of town, nestled in a grove of ancient oaks that overlooked the lake. The property had been neglected for years. The grass was waist-high, the porch was rotting, and the windows were covered in grime. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, and the smell of dust and mildew hit me like a wave. Where do we start? Mia asked, looking around at the chaos. The study, I said. Grandma always kept her important papers in a filing cabinet in the study. We walked into the study, and I saw the filing cabinet in the corner, still half full of old receipts and documents. I started pulling out folders, scanning them for anything that looked relevant. There were tax returns, utility bills, and old insurance policies, but nothing about the will. Check the bookshelves, I said. She used to keep things between pages of her favorite books. We spent the next 2 hours going through every inch of the cabin. We checked the attic, the basement, and the crawl space. We pulled out every drawer, opened every box, and shook out every old coat. Mia found a box of letters in the bedroom, and we read through them one by one. Most of them were from friends and family, but one caught my eye, a letter my grandmother had written to my father, dated a few months before she died. In the letter, she talked about the property. She said, "I want you to have everything, Paul. You've been a good son, and I know you'll take care of the land the way I always have. I've already talked to Robert about making sure the will is airtight. I don't want any arguments after I'm gone." I held the letter up, my hands shaking. "This is proof," I said. "This is her stating her intentions clearly. It might not be as good as the will, but it's something." Mia read the letter over my shoulder. "It's not notarized," she said, "but it's dated. And it references the will. Maybe that counts for something." I called Evelyn and read her the letter. She was silent for a long moment, then she said, "It's not legally binding, but it's compelling. If we can combine this letter with testimony from other people who heard your grandmother talk about the property, we might be able to build a strong enough case to get the heirs to back down." "Then we need to talk to everyone who knew her," I said. "I'll start with the neighbors. There's an old couple who lived next door for decades. They might have heard her mention the will." I spent the next hour talking to the neighbors, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet old woman in her 80s who remembered my grandmother fondly. She confirmed that my grandmother had often talked about leaving the property to my father and that she'd mentioned signing a will several times. She even remembered the notary coming to the house, a woman named Margaret Holloway. "I remember her clearly," Mrs. Henderson said. "She was a tall woman, with a loud voice and a way of talking that made you feel like you were being interrogated. She came over to have tea with your grandmother after she signed the papers. They sat on the porch for hours." "Do you remember the date?" I asked. Mrs. Henderson frowned. "It was early 2005. I remember because my grandson was born that year and I was having trouble sleeping. I saw the notary's car parked outside the cabin one afternoon. I thanked her and called Evelyn. The notary was there in early 2005, I said. We have a neighbor's testimony to confirm it. The will might not be notarized properly, but it was definitely signed in front of a notary. If we can get a statement from her, maybe we can convince the judge that it was a simple administrative error." Evelyn was cautious. "It's a start. I'll send a motion to the court requesting an extension based on new evidence. But we still need to find the original will or a certified copy. Without that, we're relying on the judge's discretion." I looked at my phone and my heart sank. It was already 8 p.m. We only had a few hours left. "I'll find it," I said. "I don't care how long it takes." I went back inside the cabin and sat on the floor of the study, surrounded by old newspapers and boxes of memories. I thought about my grandmother, and I thought about all the hours she'd spent in this room. She used to love a particular rocking chair near the window, and I remembered how she'd sit there and write letters by hand, her fountain pen scratching across the paper. I got up and walked to the rocking chair. I ran my hands along the arms, feeling the worn wood. Then I lifted the cushion, and I found it, a thick envelope hidden beneath the padding, sealed with tape and marked "Do Not Open." My heart raced as I tore open the envelope. Inside, I found the original will, the one my grandmother had written before her death. There was a note attached. To my beloved granddaughter Jenna. I know you'll find this when you need it most. Trust yourself. I held the will in my hands, and I felt a surge of emotions so powerful that I had to sit down. It was there. It was real. And it was legally binding, notarized, dated, and signed by 2 witnesses. I called Evelyn, my voice shaking. I found it. I found the original will. Are you sure it's the original? Yes. It's signed, dated, and notarized. There's no question about its validity. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll file it with the court first thing in the morning. The heirs will have to back down. They don't have a case anymore. I sat there in the rocking chair, holding the will in my hands, and I felt like I'd just won a war. The property was saved. My family's future was secured. And I had done it all on my own. The 4th chapter ends with victory. I have found the original will, and the family is safe from the heirs. But the battle with Derek is far from over. And my mother has yet to fully forgive herself for what she did to me. The courtroom was small, the kind of room where you could hear every whisper, every creak of a chair, every nervous cough. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Evelyn, my hands folded on the polished wood in front of me. Across the aisle, the heir's lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, was shuffling papers with the kind of theatrical confidence that was meant to intimidate. It wasn't working to the judge, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at the documents Evelyn had filed. The court has reviewed the original will submitted by the plaintiff's counsel, she said, her voice flat and authoritative. The will is dated properly, signed, and notarized. The notary's commission has been confirmed as valid at the time of signing. The defendant's motion to freeze the property is denied. The heir's lawyer opened his mouth, but the judge held up a hand. Furthermore, the court finds that the plaintiff has presented sufficient evidence to establish the validity of the will. The property shall remain under the control of the beneficiaries named in the document until such time as the estate is settled. The heir's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. He gathered his papers, shot me a venomous glance, and walked out of the room without a word. The heirs themselves, 2 distant cousins I'd never met, followed him, their faces pale with defeat. I turned to Evelyn, my heart pounding. It's over, she confirmed, slipping her legal pad into her briefcase. The property is secure. The timberland is yours. Well, your father's, to do with as he sees fit. The heirs have no grounds for appeal.
You did it, Jenna.
I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The adrenaline that had been pumping through my veins for weeks finally started to fade, leaving behind a strange emptiness. I had won. But winning didn't feel like I thought it would. I walked out of the courthouse and found my father waiting on the steps, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. He looked up when he saw me, and his face broke into a smile I hadn't seen in years. Jenna, he said, pulling me into a hug. You did it. I can't believe you did it. We did it, I said, pulling back. I couldn't have done it without you and Mom. And Evelyn. And Mia. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I know I've said this 100 times, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I should have stood up for you. I should have protected you. You're protecting me now, I said. That's what matters. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching the cars drive by. The sky was gray, threatening rain, but the air felt lighter somehow, like the weight of the legal battle had been lifted from all of us. There's something else, my father said, his voice hesitant. Derek called this morning. He wants to see you. He said he wants to apologize. I felt a surge of anger, quick and hot. He had his chance to apologize. He chose to blame me instead.
He's been drinking, my father said.
He's been spiraling. Brittany left him, just for a few days. She went to stay with her parents, and he's been a wreck. He said he finally understands what he did to you. He wants to make it right. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell my father that Derek had made his bed, and it was time for him to lie in it. But I could see the hope in my father's eyes, and I knew that if I said no, it would break him.
Fine, I said.
I'll meet him. But if he tries to blame me again, I walk. My father nodded, and I knew he understood. We met at Betty's cafe that evening. The place was almost empty, and Derek was sitting in the same booth where we'd signed the contracts weeks ago. He looked worse than before. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes disheveled, and his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his coffee cup. I slid into the booth across from him. You wanted to see me. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Genuine remorse. I'm sorry, he said, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry for everything. For what I said, what I did, how I treated you. I was scared, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I studied him for a long moment. Why now, why not weeks ago, when I was trying to save your wedding? Because I was stupid, he said, and he laughed bitterly. I was too proud to admit that you were right. You've been right about everything. I ran up the debt. I let Mom and Dad co-sign on everything. I pushed you out because you made me feel small, and I couldn't handle it. You made me feel small, I said. You literally made me homeless. I know, he said, and his voice cracked. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I want to make it right. I want to be a better brother. I want to be a better father if I ever get the chance. I looked at him, and I saw the brother I remembered from childhood, the one who used to push me on the swings, who taught me how to ride a bike, who defended me from the neighborhood bullies before he became one. He'd been lost for a long time, buried under the weight of his own ego and my parents' expectations. But somewhere underneath, he was still there. I need to know something, I said. If the wedding had gone through, if Brittany had left you, if Mom and Dad had lost the house, would you have ever realized what you did to me? He was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I'd like to think I would have. But I can't promise that. I was so deep in my own mess that I couldn't see anyone else's. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me, I said. He looked at me, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Does that mean you forgive me? I shook my head. I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to try. For Mom and Dad, for the baby, for the family we used to have. He nodded slowly, and I could see the relief wash over his face. That's more than I deserve. You're right, I said. But I'm giving it to you anyway. We sat in silence for a moment, and I realized that the anger I'd been carrying wasn't gone. It was just quieter, less insistent. It was still there, buried deep, but I'd learned to live with it. I'd learned to use it. How is Brittany? I asked. She's staying with her parents, he said. She's not sure she wants to come back. She's scared I'll go back to my old ways. Will you? He shook his head. I've been seeing a therapist. I've been going meetings. I'm not the same person I was a month ago. I don't want to be that person anymore. I reached across the table and took his hand. Then prove it. Not to me, to yourself. To Brittany. To your child. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying. He squeezed my hand, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. I will, he said. I promise. I walked out of Betty's cafe feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The legal battle was over. My brother was finally acknowledging his mistakes, and my family was slowly, painfully, starting to heal. But I knew the journey wasn't over. There were still conversations to be had, wounds to be healed, and a future to be built. When I got home, I found Mia waiting for me in the parking lot of my apartment building. She had a bottle of wine and a sheepish grin on her face. I heard the good news, she said. I figured you deserved a celebration. I took the bottle and smiled. You have no idea how much I needed this. We went up to my studio, and I told her everything, the courtroom, the hearing, the conversation with Derek. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she raised her glass. To Jenna, she said. The girl who survived. I clinked my glass against hers. To the people who helped me survive. We drank in silence for a moment, and then Mia said, So, what's next? You've got the property. The wedding is postponed, and your family is finally starting to get its act together. What do you want to do now? I looked around my tiny studio, at the mattress on the floor, the hot plate, the succulents on the windowsill. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed more. I want to go back to school, I said. I want to become a physical therapist like I always planned. I want to help people heal, the way I'm trying to help my family heal.
Mia smiled.
That sounds like a plan. It does, I agreed. But first, I need to talk to Mom. She's been avoiding me since the property dispute ended. I think she's scared. Of what? I don't know. Maybe she's scared that I'll reject her. Maybe she's scared that she's lost me for good. Mia looked at me, her eyes serious. Have you lost her? I thought about it. I don't think so. But I need to know she's really sorry. I need to know she's ready to fight for me the way I fought for her. I called my mother the next morning. She answered on the first ring, her voice tentative.
Jenna.
Mom, I need to see you. Can we talk? There was a pause, and then she said, Of course. I'll come to you. Just tell me where. I gave her the address of my studio, and within an hour, she was standing in my doorway, looking small and uncertain. She carried a Tupperware container filled with cookies, my favorite, the ones she used to make when I was a kid. I thought you might like these, she said, holding them out. I took the container and set it on the counter. Thank you, Mom. She stood there, awkwardly, her hands clasped in front of her. I don't know how to say this, she began. I've been trying to find the words for weeks, but I don't know if they exist. I failed you. I failed you so badly, and I don't know how to make it right. I sat down on the edge of my mattress and gestured for her to join me. She sat down slowly, like she was afraid the floor would collapse beneath her. I'm not looking for perfection, I said. I'm looking for honesty. I need to know that you see me, that you understand what you did. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I see you, Jenna. I see you so clearly now. I was so caught up in Derek's drama, in the wedding, in the baby, that I forgot who you were. I forgot how strong you are, how brave, how kind. I let you walk out that door, and I didn't even try to stop you. That's the truth, I said. That's what I needed to hear. She reached out and took my hand. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. And if you never forgive me, I understand. I just want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. I looked at my mother, and I saw the woman who used to read me bedtime stories, who held my hand when I got my first shot, who cried at my high school graduation. She wasn't perfect. She'd made terrible mistakes. But she was still my mother. I love you too, I said. And I'm going to give you a chance. But you have to promise me something. Anything, she said. Promise me you'll never choose anyone over me again. I don't care if it's Derek, the baby, or the Pope. I'm your daughter, and I matter. She pulled me into a hug, and I felt the sobs shaking her body. You matter, she said. You matter more than anything. The 5th chapter ends with reconciliation. My mother has acknowledged her mistakes, and I've given her a chance to make things right. But the healing is just beginning, and there are still fractures in the family that will take time to repair. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was still half asleep, tangled in the thin blanket on my mattress, when my phone buzzed against the floor. I fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. It was Evelyn. Jenna, I need you to come to my office. Now. Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that made my stomach drop. I'd heard that tone before. It was the voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news. What happened? I asked, sitting up so fast I nearly knocked over my succulents. Just get here. I'll explain when you arrive. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, didn't bother with coffee, and drove across town in silence. The streets were empty, the morning fog still clinging to the pavement. By the time I reached Evelyn's office, my hands were shaking. She was waiting for me at the front desk, a thick folder in her hands. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that told me she hadn't slept either. I got a call this morning from the heir's lawyer, she said, leading me into her office and closing the door. He's filing a new motion. This time, it's not about the will. Then what is it about? She sat down across from me and slid a document across the desk. It's about the cabin. Specifically, the land the cabin sits on. According to the heir's research, your grandmother didn't actually own the property outright. There was a secondary deed, a quitclaim deed from her first husband that was never properly recorded. The heirs are arguing that because the deed was never filed, the property technically reverted to the state when her first husband died, which means the cabin, the lakefront, and about 50 acres of timberland are not ours. I finished, my voice hollow. Evelyn nodded. I've already started looking into it. The deed was signed in 1978, but it was never filed with the county clerk's office. It's a clerical error, but it's one that could cost us everything. I stared at the document, trying to process the words. This can't be happening. We just won. We had the will. We had everything. Legal battles are rarely over when they seem to be, Evelyn said, her voice softening. The heirs are desperate. They know they lost on the will, so they're grasping at straws. But this particular straw might have some weight. If the deed was never recorded, the state could have a claim to the property. And if the state has a claim, we're looking at a whole new legal nightmare. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair. How long do we have? 30 days to respond. But I've already started working on a strategy. We need to find the original deed, the one from 1978. If we can prove that your grandmother and her first husband intended to transfer the property, and that the only issue was the failure to record the deed, we might be able to convince a judge to validate the transfer. Where would the original deed be? Evelyn shook her head. That's the problem. The heir's lawyer has been digging through public records for months. If the original deed isn't on file with the county, it might not exist. Your grandmother might have kept it, or her first husband might have taken it with him when they divorced. I've already requested records from the county clerk's office, but I'm not optimistic. I thought about the cabin, about the hours I'd spent rifling through boxes and drawers. I'll go back to the cabin, I said. I'll tear it apart again. There has to be something. Evelyn nodded. I'll work on getting an extension. But Jenna, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that we won't find it. If we can't prove the transfer, the state will take the property. And there won't be anything we can do to stop it. I left Evelyn's office and drove straight to the cabin. The morning fog had burned off, replaced by a hazy sun that did nothing to warm the air. The cabin looked even more dilapidated than before, the porch sagging, the windows dark and empty, the weeds reaching up to my knees. I let myself in and stood in the middle of the living room, trying to figure out where to start. The first time I'd searched the cabin, I'd been looking for the will. I'd gone through the study, the bedroom, the basement. But I hadn't searched the kitchen. I hadn't searched the pantry. I walked into the kitchen and opened every cabinet, every drawer. I found old spices, expired cans of soup, and a collection of mismatched Tupperware. Nothing. I checked the pantry, pulling out boxes of cereal and bags of flour, but there was nothing behind them. Then I saw it, a small, rusty lockbox tucked behind a stack of old cookbooks. It was the kind of box you'd use to store jewelry or important documents. I pulled it out and tried to open it, but it was locked. I looked around for a key, but I couldn't find one. I thought about breaking it open, but I didn't want to damage whatever was inside. Instead, I called my mother. Mom, do you know where Grandma kept a small lockbox? It's in the kitchen pantry. There was a pause. She had a box, my mother said. It was her mother's. She kept it in the pantry for years. She said it held her most precious memories. Do you know where the key is? I don't, but she used to keep a spare key in the back of her jewelry box. Did you check her bedroom? I ran to the bedroom and opened the jewelry box on the dresser. It was filled with costume jewelry, tangled necklaces, and brooches. I dug through them until my fingers closed around a small brass key. I ran back to the kitchen, my heart pounding, and inserted the key into the lockbox. It clicked open, and I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a stack of letters, old photographs, and a folded piece of paper that looked like a legal document. I unfolded it, and my hands started shaking. It was the original quitclaim deed, dated 1978, signed by my grandmother's first husband and notarized by a county clerk. It was the proof we needed. I called Evelyn, my voice shaking with excitement. I found it. I found the original deed. Are you sure it's the original? Yes. It's signed, dated, and notarized. There's no question about its validity. I could hear the relief in Evelyn's voice. I'll file it with the court today. The heirs won't have a case anymore. The property is ours. I sat down on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the evidence of my grandmother's life, and I cried. I cried for the years I'd lost, for the battles I'd fought, for the family I'd nearly lost. And I cried for my grandmother, who had left behind these pieces of the past that had saved us all. The 6th chapter ends with another victory. The deed is found, and the property is secured. But the emotional toll is heavy, and the healing is far from complete. The cabin felt different now. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a monument to everything I'd been through, every battle I'd fought, every tear I'd shed. I sat on the porch with the lockbox in my lap, staring out at the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the pale afternoon sky like a mirror. Mia was inside, making us sandwiches with the few ingredients I'd managed to scavenge from the pantry. She'd driven out to keep me company, and I was grateful for the distraction. The silence of the cabin had a way of amplifying every thought, every doubt, every fear. "Hey," she called from the kitchen. "You want mustard or mayo?" "Either," I said, not taking my eyes off the lake. She came out a few minutes later with 2 plates and a couple of sodas. She sat down on the porch swing beside me, and we ate in companionable silence. The wind rustled through the oak trees, and a bird sang somewhere in the distance. "So," Mia said, breaking the quiet. "What's next? The property is secure. The will is valid. The deed is filed. You've officially saved your family from financial ruin."
What now?
I took a bite of my sandwich and chewed slowly.
I've been thinking about that.
I want to go back to school. I've already applied to the community college for the spring semester. I'm going to study physical therapy.
Mia grinned.
That's amazing. You're going to be great at it. I hope so, I said. I've been helping people my whole life. I just didn't realize it until now. We sat in silence for a while, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was strange, this feeling of contentment. I'd spent so long fighting that I'd forgotten what it was like to simply exist. My phone buzzed. It was my father. "Jenna, can you come to the house? There's something I need to talk to you about." I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. I have something I want to show you." I told Mia I'd be back, and I drove to my parents' house. The house looked the same as it always had. The peeling paint, the overgrown roses, the porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. But it felt different now. It felt like home. My father met me at the door, his face unreadable. "Come in," he said. "I have something to give you." He led me to the study, where my mother was waiting. She looked nervous, twisting her hands in front of her. On the desk was a thick manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked. My father gestured for me to sit down. "Your mother and I have been talking. A lot. About everything that's happened. About how we failed you. About how we want to make it right." I looked at the envelope, then back at my parents. "What's inside?" My mother stepped forward. "We've decided to give you the cabin. And the timberland.
It's yours, Jenna.
We've already signed the transfer papers." I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. "What? No. I can't accept that. It's your retirement. It's everything you've worked for. It's everything you've fought for," my father said. "You're the one who saved it. You're the one who found the will, the deed, who stood up to the heirs. We should have given it to you years ago. You deserve it." I shook my head. "I didn't do this for the property. I did it for our family." "I know," my mother said, her voice trembling. "That's why we want you to have it. You're not just our daughter anymore. You're our partner. You've proven that you can handle things we never could. The property is safer in your hands than it ever was in ours." I looked at the envelope, then back at my parents. They were both staring at me, their eyes filled with hope and fear and love. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Say yes," my father said. "Please." I took the envelope and opened it. Inside were the transfer papers, already signed. The cabin, the timberland, the lakefront, it was all mine. I looked up at my parents, and I felt tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I said. "I don't know what I did to deserve this." "You survived," my mother said. "That's more than we did." I left the house that evening with the envelope tucked under my arm. I drove back to the cabin, and I sat on the porch again, watching the sun set over the lake. The sky was orange and pink, streaked with clouds that looked like brushstrokes on a canvas. I thought about everything that had led me here. The trash bags, the $47, the park bench. I thought about Mia, about Evelyn, about my parents and Derek. I thought about my grandmother, who had left behind the pieces of a puzzle I'd had to solve on my own. I wasn't the same person I'd been a year ago. I was stronger, more confident, more self-assured. But I was also more tired. The battles had taken a toll, and I knew there were still more to come. But for now, sitting on the porch of my cabin, looking out at my lake, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The 7th chapter ends with a gift and a new beginning. My parents have given me the cabin and the timberland, and I've finally started to heal. But I know the journey isn't over. There are still hard conversations ahead, and the future is uncertain. The wedding was held on the first Saturday of October, exactly 1 year after the original date. But everything about it was different. Brittany walked down the aisle in the same dress she'd bought months ago, but she wore it with a different kind of grace. The venue was smaller, more intimate, a restored barn on the edge of the timberland I now owned. The flowers were the ones Patricia had saved from the original contract, arranged in mason jars on tables draped with burlap. Rick the caterer had outdone himself, serving a menu that was half the price of the original but twice as good. And Derek stood at the altar, clean-shaven and sober, his eyes fixed on Brittany with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It was love, pure and uncomplicated. I sat in the front row, next to Mia, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My mother was on my other side, her hand resting on my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. My father was at the altar with Derek, serving as his best man, his chest puffed out with pride. The ceremony was short, the kind of ceremony that focused on the vows rather than the spectacle. When Derek said, "I promise to be a better man tomorrow than I am today," I felt a lump form in my throat. He wasn't perfect. He might never be perfect, but he was trying. After the reception, when the guests had gone home and the barn was quiet, I walked out to the lake. The moon was full, casting silver ripples across the water. I sat down on the dock, my feet dangling over the edge, and I let out a long breath. I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Derek walking toward me. He was still wearing his tuxedo, the bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, and he sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of his cologne. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for everything. The wedding, the property, the way you handled Mom and Dad." I don't think I ever said it properly. "You've said it," I said. "More than once." "Yeah, but I don't think I meant it until now." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been going to therapy. Really going, not just showing up. I've been working on the things that made me the way I was. The jealousy, the insecurity, the need to be the center of attention." "That's good," I said. "That's really good." "I know I can't undo what I did to you," he continued. "I know that. But I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. Not because I want forgiveness. Because I want to be worthy of having you as a sister." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw someone I could trust. Not a threat, not a rival, not a bully. Just a man who had been lost and was finally finding his way. "I forgive you," I said. "Not because you deserve it. Because I deserve to let go of the anger." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thank you." We sat in silence for a while, watching the moon rise higher in the sky. Then Derek stood up and extended his hand to me. "Come on," he said. "They're going to cut the cake soon. And I know you've been eyeing that chocolate tier." I took his hand, and he pulled me to my feet. I looked at the cabin in the distance, the old house that had caused so much pain and had become the symbol of our family's redemption. One day, I said, "I'm going to fix it up. The cabin. Make it the place Grandma always wanted it to be." "It's yours," Derek said. "You can do whatever you want with it." I shook my head. "It's not just mine. It belongs to all of us now. The whole family. That's what Grandma would have wanted." Derek looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, we were finally becoming the family we were supposed to be. "Let's go find the cake," he said, and I followed him back to the barn. The sound of laughter and music spilling out into the night. I stood on the threshold of the barn, watching my family celebrate. My mother was dancing with my father, her head resting on his shoulder. Brittany was laughing with her bridesmaids, her face radiant with joy. Mia was at the dessert table, loading up a plate with leftovers. Derek was cutting the cake, his hand steady, his smile genuine. And I realized, in that moment, that I had gotten everything I ever wanted. Not the money, not the property, not the victory in court. I had gotten my family back. And that was worth more than all of it. The final chapter ends with peace. The wedding is a success. Derek and I have reconciled, and the family is whole again. I stand on the threshold of the barn, ready to join them, knowing that the future is finally ours to shape.